Hey guys, it's me, Mike. We're reading from pages 431 through 433. Never Stand Still. Copyright 1999 CNF Publications. This is entitled CNF Motor Freight in the Slow Lane. The onset of the recession in late 1990 resulted in overcapacity, discounting, and a buyer's market in the transportation industry. CF Motor Freight's adjustments to these conditions had been neither easy nor successful. In 1990, CF Motor Freight's operating income had been $108.5 million. In 1991, it dropped by half to $52 million. And in 1992, the long-haul carrier had a $27.5 million loss. Much more than an economic downturn was at work, however. The business recession fully exposed the problems that had been growing with the long-haul motor carrier industry. Since deregulation, traditional unionized motor carriers had been steadily giving away most of their profits to shippers so they could compete with non-union rates. But as long as business volume stayed high and kept growing, the effects of this were not readily apparent. Not enough attention had been paid, quote, to the fact that the thousands of competitors who were going bankrupt were all union, and even more, thousands of carriers who were starting up were all non-union, Donald Moffat said in early 1993. He emphasized that there had not been one union startup since deregulation. CF Motor Freight's strategy over the past 10 years had been to, quote, run with the big boys, in Moffat's words, sacrificing profit margin in return for market share. The race was over, and while Yellow, Roadway, and CF had all gained market share, they had given away a great deal of profitable traffic to the non-union carriers, largely because of union restrictions. CF, like other companies, had little choice but to make its most innovative moves, creating the Conways and Menlo Logistics outside of the CF Motor Freight. Non-union competitors could keep rates low without discounting because they could offer better service with lower labor costs. But unionized carriers like CF Motor Freight continued to battle each other in the marketplace and would not implement the rate increases needed to offset ever-increasing labor costs. Moffat was also concerned that labor productivity was dropping. He blamed much of this, quote, on a new union leadership, which seemed much more willing to sacrifice union jobs and union companies than give in on feather-bedding work rules. CF Motor Freight needed more than, quote, adjustments, Moffat said in early 1993. It needed to be completely turned around. The new union leadership that so frustrated Moffat and other trucking CEOs was personified by Ron Carey, a former UPS employee, narrowly elected to the Teamsters union presidency in 1992. By the 1960s, the Teamsters had organized more than half of the LTL industries. After 1980, Teamster rank thinned at an alarming rate, and in just over a decade, Teamster membership had dropped to around 6% of the industry. From the time that Teamsters rise to national premiscent, I don't know that word, premise under Dave Beck and Jimmy Hoffa, and continuing until the early 1990s, the union had been known for racketeering and corruption. But just as important to Carey and his followers was that Hoffa had ruled the union with an iron hand. The few locals that resisted his authority were often themselves run by small-scale despots. Up to the 1970s, individual Teamsters had usually been willing to exchange union democracy for high wages and benefits. But when the union began to crumble, the old leadership came under challenge. Carey's adherents believed that the union's problem stemmed from cozy relationships that the Teamsters and employers had created before deregulation, when rates were protected and wages steadily rose. Only by challenging the employers, they reasoned, could the Teamsters regain the security lost after deregulation, and they could only challenge employers if decision-making was restored to the rank and file. Carey had a difficult balancing act before him. He knew very well that the unionized characters were at a disadvantage, but he could only retain his constituency by pushing for further concessions. In the fall of 1992, Carey met with top industry executives, and he acknowledged the pressures they faced due to non-union competition and existing Teamster wage benefits. His main emphasis was on increasing employment in the union sector, an attitude that Moffett hoped would lead to a willingness to agree to more flexible work rules. These rules would be central to the negotiations leading to the 1994 National Master Freight Agreement, and there were few encouraging signs of compromise after Carey's election. The Philadelphia local approved an operating change, allowing one CF terminal to perform the work previously handled by 7 terminals. This was key concession to CF since CF was desperately trying to scale back on the freight flow system. The union also allowed CF to combine 6 terminals in the Akron, Ohio area under one roof to save $750,000 annually. But the Teamsters continued to resist employer efforts to increase the use of rail or sleeper operations that would lower costs on transcontinental hauls. CF's decision to create a new non-union regional carrier in the Northeast did not help matters. During the 1990s, demand for fast regional service far outpaced the demand for long-haul LTL service. Revenue growth on the Conway's regional lanes exceeded 30% from 1991 to 1992. Long-haul lane growth over the same period was less than 4%, and CF Motor Freight began to adopt the freight flow system accordingly. Freight Flow 3 sought to create shorter transit lanes, provide faster service, and enable the company to meet non-union regional competition. The 1992 terminal closings in Philadelphia and Akron were in accordance with this plan. Not surprisingly, Freight Flow 3 adopted many of the concepts that had proved successful for the non-union regionals, including dock automation, reduced handling, increased labor flexibility, and telemarketing. Efforts to contain costs were important, but insufficient. "We can work on costs until hell freezes over," Moffett lamented, "and it still does not solve our major problem, inadequate pricing." In 1993, CF Motor Freight cut unprofitable revenue and tonnage and boosted its operating income on the remaining freight, but it was clear that the long-haul subsidiary could not attain the profit margins it had once enjoyed. Nonetheless, Moffett was determined to restore CF Motor Freight to its past profitability.